Hello, everybody. This is the Chocolate News Podcast. I'm your co host, John Alexander Reese.
And I'm your co host, Andria Carter.
And if you didn't know, the Cincinnati Herald has been around since 1955 and is the leading African American owned newspaper in the greater Cincinnati area and the northern Kentucky area. So, how are you doing today, Andrea?
I am fine. I'm getting excited because Labor Day weekend's coming up and I'm going to the Chicago Jazz Festival. So I know I'm though there is going to be a local jazz festival here. I'm going up to hang out with some friends and get away for a couple days.
Sounds fun. And today we have a special guest with us, filmmaker Laure Quinlivan. But before we jump into that, we have some chocolate news of the week. So, Andrea, what is the chocolate news of the week?
Well, it's a little bit. It's been an interesting week news wise. We're getting ready to go into the Labor Day holiday weekend, so we're getting everything up front, and then it's going to calm down. But I would start off with, unfortunately, I always hate it when we have bad news about a police officer. Not everyone is perfect, but they do have to work at a certain standard. And the police chief, Cincinnati Police Chief Thigpen, interim police chief, I should say, fired Officer Rose Valentino for her use of the N word while on duty. And that happened last week. No, I'm sorry, it happened this week that she was officially fired after all the investigations and things like that. And I know it can be frustrating for police officers at times, but there are certain things you should not do while on duty, especially policing a city that is at least 46% black. Certain things are a no no. I don't care if you like it or not, but it's a no no. And unfortunately, hate speech is one of them. You should not be speaking while on duty. And she did. I know that some people were very upset by this. It was a big reaction. But she is one. There's another officer who also had some biased speech as well. I don't know what happened with her yet, but she is the first one to be fired over this. So there's that. Second, there is the vote happens tomorrow on Thursday, but Cincinnati Mayor Aftab Purval announced his decision to present to City Council Cheryl Long, who is currently Assistant City Manager, to be the new City Manager of Cincinnati government. And what's unique about Cheryl Long, she's been working for the city for over 4 years. So she knows all the ins and outs, and she helped the city survive COVID, the pandemic, even though we're still in it. She helped get it through. She understands the needs of the city. She's been working on it for a long time. So she's not a novice. She has walked the walk. She talks the talk. And she was recently out on the streets doing tours and over the Rhine to see what's happening, firsthand. So she's very hands on, she's very transparent, and I think she's going to be a breath of fresh air. Because I don't think we ever had, oh no, I take that back. We've had a woman, a female city manager before? I'm trying to remember. Yes, Val Demings was one for a minute. I think she's like the second woman to be considered our city manager for the city of Cincinnati, which says a lot about Cincinnati. So, John Kerp, who's been serving as interim city manager, he also applied for the position, but I also know that in his contract that he has right now, that he might be considered for a different position. Even he might become city solicitor or something. So, well, it'd be interesting to see what happens with John and what Cheryl does next, because she'll be picking the next police chief. Now, this is an oldie but a goodie. Mikhail Gorbachev.
Oh, yeah, Soviet Union, my
The Soviet
favorite.
Union, yes, he was the last president of the Soviet Union before the fall. He was the one who was reaching out to Western leaders, reaching out to the world. He went through a lot. He was the one who sort of put a positive spin on being Soviet Union, and then their economy went accelerated. There was a hyperinflation. A lot of people lost their jobs, their life savings. A lot of factories shut down. They actually had bread lines, which hadn't been seen since the Depression. And then his wife, who died of leukemia, so he was a widower, and he got a little sympathy from that. But overall, he was trying to address and move the Soviet Union past the Cold War and be better than what it was with socialism. And unfortunately, it blew up in his face. So he retired, and he is survived by a daughter and two granddaughters, and that's it. But the Kremlin didn't have very nice things to say about him. But
Obviously.
but I mean, also, if you think about him, he was around with Joseph Stalin, with Brezhnev, with Andropov, Yuri Andropov, and also Konstantin Chernenko. And
Mhm.
he became president after Chernenko. So just think of all the history that he, as a young politician, was witnessing and participating in the Soviet Union during that time with all these things. And then he had that summit meeting with Ronald Reagan and then George Bush, trying to reduce the both the American and Soviet nuclear arsenals, which I believe served the world well. Though now some people think that no, they need nuclear arms now as well. So, unfortunately, a lot of good that was done with those summits is now seeing a little bit of harm now because other people want to hold the power, so to speak. But Gorbachev, he is a legend for helping to move the Soviet Union past the Cold War and to try and become a leader in the world in a different way. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out because the Soviet Union is no more, but what is now Russia is the Kremlin, and everything is just unbelievable.
Well, I didn't grow up obviously during the Soviet Union or the Cold War, but actually my first exposure to him, and he even said this in the article that he was in the ad for Pizza Hut. So I thought that was
Yes.
kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
I,
I know I'm a tad older than you, and um, but I mean, Gorbachev, I was a young kid when a lot of this was going on. I was in high school and college, just starting out in the work world. Seeing what happened with Gorbachev, I did get to see him when I worked. Let me think for a second. When I was starting out as a newspaper reporter in
Hmm,
New Jersey, he came to, what was it? He came to New Jersey to do a conference. And because I knew someone, I got to be part of the coverage of this event where he was a keynote speaker. I think it was the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce brought him in to speak for some celebration or something other like that. And I
interesting.
got to hear him and see him. So that was my claim to fame, to see this guy and hear him. He was very personable, very funny, very witty, but he also had some interesting views regarding socialism, about where the world was at the time. And I'm just sorry to see that he has died, but he was a figure to be around at the time. He
Hmm,
tried to do a lot of good for Russia. Um, Unfortunately, Russia has gone a different way now, so
yeah,
it's kind of sad. But
yeah.
anyway, so a little blast from the class, like I said, regarding the news. NASA NASA scrubbed on Monday their test launch of their new moon rocket. They were having problems with the fuel, and believe it was loading the fuel,
Hmm,
and it caused some engine problems. So they had to sort of take a look, and from what I understand now, that they are now scheduled. They're going to try for Saturday. The rocket remains on its pad at Kennedy Space Center, and just the crew part is empty, but they're going to have some dummies in there, which is interesting. Three test dummies. I think the ones that do the car tests. Maybe I'm just that's
Oh,
what I'm
crash
picturing.
test dummies.
The
Okay.
crash test. That's what I'm picturing in my mind. That's going out into space to wing the way around the moon real quick. So they're going to try and do the test launch on Saturday, which I'm going to try and watch myself. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens, if it's going to it's supposed to go up into the air, go around the moon, come back home.
Hmm.
So hopefully, keep our fingers crossed. There will be no problems with fueling. There will be no problems with the weather. They don't have any bad sensors or anything like that. And they will get this test up because if this works, and I believe it's by either 2024 or 2025, they will have a crew that's training now for this mission, and it will be a very diverse crew going to the moon. So where we saw Armstrong walk on the moon, we're now going to have someone else probably attempt to walk on the moon of color, which will
That's
be the
uh
first.
that's amazing because I never thought we would go back to the moon, especially in my lifetime, because I was just getting the feeling that there's nothing else on the moon for us to explore. I just thought it would just be Mars and beyond.
Well, I think I think what it is that you got to go to the moon first before you go to Mars.
True.
Because I think what may end up happening to get to Mars, because that's such a long way, they probably going to have people go to the moon, then rest, and then from the moon go to Mars because that'll be a shorter space of time to
Yeah.
get to there. That's I don't know for sure. I'm guessing. You know, my imagination is going gangbusters right now because I've seen the moon rocks. I as a I'm dating myself now. As a child, I walked. Armstrong walk on the moon. My father pulled me upstairs to the upstairs den, old black and white TV. He's like, okay, you have to watch this. This is historic. And we watched. The TV was sitting on a chair. I remember this. And we watched this man go down this ladder and say what he said and walk on the moon. Four
I
years old.
remember it too, Andrea.
Okay,
I'm
you're right there with me. Okay.
Yep.
So, I mean, and the fact that we're going back to it is not only nostalgic, but it gives everyone a sense of going to back what John Kennedy said, hey, we're going to the moon, we're going to do this. And even though there's been this long lapse between, I think for the future of the planet and the world, we are explorers. We want to learn, we want to see. And I think it's in our best interest to once again not only continue to explore below the sea, but also explore the sky above. What's out there? Who might be out there? Who might be visiting us? We don't know, but our imagining, we have a lot of science fiction going on right now. I've been reading a lot of stuff where people are living away from Earth and they're calling it Terra and other stuff. And, my imagination is just flying. So I'm very excited by this because, maybe 20 years from now, we'll be taking, hey, let's go away for the weekend. Okay, let's go to the moon. We might be saying that. So you just don't know. So, instead of a weekend in Vegas, we do a weekend on the moon. So
That'd be awesome.
wouldn't it be great?
Yeah.
My imagination again. So, and last but not least, as I said, we're still in a pandemic. And actually, this just happened today. The CDC cleared both Pfizer and Moderna to do updates on the COVID boosters. So within the next 10 to 12 days or so, the next booster will be available for people, and it will be triggered more toward the Omicron strain of the COVID strain. So I think everyone who's been vaccinated against the regular strain, and now we got Omicron, we need to be vaccinated for the Omicron strain. So I think that's a good thing. And I think the more that we adhere and take care of and fight this, the more normal our lives will be. And even though I still carry masks with me in my purse and everything else, and I'm very aware, I think this is getting us back to a normal world again, so to speak, in a little bit way. So this is a good thing.
Yes, definitely. I will be definitely getting my second booster when I can.
Yeah.
Get the
I've been
second
waiting
booster.
on this new version to get my second booster too. I wanted to wait and see how, might as well get the one that's targeted towards the variant that's out there now.
Well, I've had the two boosters because my father is older and I want to be able to make sure I get to see him, but I'm going to get this booster as well. So, because you just never know. And will also advise everyone to get your flu shot
Yep.
Take care of yourself. Just be aware. Just take care of, be healthy, and just get all the shots that you're supposed to get to take care of you, especially in older Americans. If you're over the age 50, even over age 55, you need to take special care of yourself, whether you want to get the booster or the vaccine or not. I think it's in your best interest to stay healthy, be aware who's around you, and take care of them. And if you do suffer from a chronic medical condition, it's in your best interest to do everything you can to stay healthy and keep those around you healthy. So that's the end of my soapbox, and that's the end of chocolate news for today.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrea. And so we're going to head into our main topic, and I want to reintroduce Laure Quinlivan. So how's it going, Laure?
It's going good, and I want to add one 2 cents worth to your chocolate news item on the new city manager.
Go for it.
I think it's absolutely fantastic that city council members actually got the opportunity this time to interview both candidates and, weigh in before the mayor made his decision. As a former council member, I can tell you that doesn't usually happen. It
Mm.
usually is the mayor's already made his decision, and you're lucky if you get to interview the candidate before he or she is hired. So at least, everyone got to interview them both. And I don't know Cheryl Long, although I think she was working there when I was on council, but I do know John Kerr because he was our city solicitor when I was on council, and he is a great guy. So shout out to John for doing a great job, as interim, and hopefully he'll stay with the city, or maybe he'll just go back to a, much higher paying job as a lawyer in a big law firm. But he was great. He's a good guy.
Gotcha. And I did not know that. Thank you for sharing that little info with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. But today you're here to share your new film. So
Yeah.
tell us, and I think it was Living with Landslides, correct?
Yes, that's the title because that's what we have to do here in our region.
So yeah, so tell us a little bit about your film.
Well, this film is about this area, this whole region, and why we are a top landslide hazard area in the United States. Believe it or not, we're one of the top 4 areas in the country for landslide.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of people just don't realize that, especially if you've moved here from another city. And even if you've lived here for a long time, like I have, 27 years, I really didn't understand the depth of the problem. So this goes into why we're so prone to landslides, and how it happened, how humans made it worse, why it's something we really have to pay attention to, because climate change is only going to make things worse as we get bigger floods and more landslides. And the cost to repair landslide damage is just staggering. It's staggering whether you're a taxpayer and we have to help fund the repair on roadways like Columbia Parkway or Elberon Avenue, or if you're a private property owner. These are the landslides nobody ever hears about, because when that happens, it's totally on the homeowner. And unfortunately, homeowners insurance does not cover it. So if you happen to have a landslide on your property, it can wipe out your biggest investment. These type of things don't really make the news, because it might involve one family or a few families. And so I think this is going to bring a lot of awareness to people. And I want to give a shout out to the reason we're doing it is all because of the Hillside Trust. If you've ever heard of them, they are a nonprofit here and they're dedicated to preserving our region's hillsides. And the executive director of the Hillside Trust came to me a couple years ago and said, "We saw that documentary you did, Blue Goes Green, on the city building the, first net zero energy police station. Would you be interested in doing a documentary on landslides?" And I said, "Of course,"
Mhm.
and they said, "We want to educate the public, and we think film is a really great way to do it." So thank you to Hillside Trust for, first of all, having the idea and also for raising the money to do it. This is the first time I've ever done one of these, outside of a TV station where I did not also have to raise the money. So
Right.
it was just so wonderful that they had somebody else take care of that, and they raised the money for the documentary from private donors, a lot of foundations, family foundations. And it's finally going to air. And we're airing it on my old station, Channel 9. I used to work there for 13 years as an I-Team reporter. And it's going to be airing Wednesday, September 7th at 9 p.m. prime time. I don't know
Oh,
what they are
nice.
preempting. I know, but it's like they're not even sticking us on a weekend morning or something, where no one's going to see it. So
Yeah, that's
we're all,
amazing.
yeah, we're excited. And it's the documentary itself is only 44 minutes, but because it's going to be airing on Channel 9, they wanted us to give them some places for commercial breaks so they could sell advertising. So it will be an hour program, from 9 to
Right.
10, but it's not technically an hour long documentary. So
Let me
Yeah.
ask you this, Lori, from someone who has experienced flooding a lot. What are those landslides occurring because of excess water, because of development, or is it just climate change, or is it just all three together?
it's a combo of what you just said, but the thing that will start a landslide quicker than anything else is water running down a hill, whether it's coming out of somebody's drain pipe or whether it's, climate change and just torrential rains. These are things that exacerbate landslides. But we're also on really shaky ground in terms of our soil, our geology. And so that's a factor too. And then anytime something is removed from the hill, whether it's, vegetation and trees, when the hillside is disturbed by development or whatever, it only makes it worse and slipperier. So we go into the story of we have a guy who's a science teacher from Walnut Hills High School, but he's also a geologist, and he did his master's on landslides when he was at UC, his graduate thesis. And he kind of explains the human actions that have been taken over the years that have made landslides worse here in Cincinnati. So when those early settlers came up the river and settled, Cincinnati, the first thing they did was cut down all the trees and start quarrying rock out of the hillsides to build. And we were one of the fastest growing cities in the country at that time in the 1850. And so they really destabilized the hillside, the settlers did, and then it was already unstable because of our geology. So it's pretty much been sliding ever since. And one of the high profile slides that I think everybody's heard about or maybe seen is Columbia Parkway, because it was so prominent. And as you may remember, our city diverted $18 million that was supposed to go to build a new District 5 police station. And that's the station that serves College Hill and Clifton and a lot of other neighborhoods. They were supposed to get a new station. And instead, because of the landslide issues in 2019 on Columbia Parkway, that money was diverted to repair for Columbia Parkway. So that's been going on for 2 years. And that just happened to be when we were shooting the documentary. So we also feature Columbia Parkway and how they did it. And it's fascinating, especially most of us just don't know anything about how you would stabilize a hill like that. So it's interesting to see it in all of its stages and hear from folks about it.
Well, I mean, Columbia Parkway, because you have the roadway on one level, then you have the train system on another part of the hill, and then you have the people below the hill. And then with all of that movement, I'm sure has been moving the rock underneath the hill for some
Well,
time.
yeah, that hill, when you think about it, that hill, starts at the top and goes all the way down to the river. So the first thing that came in, I guess, was the railroad, that's close along like where Riverside Drive is. And then in 1930 is when they built Columbia Parkway. And from the day that they started building Columbia Parkway, they've been having landslides. They were having landslides as they built it, and they just kept right on building. So, I mean, engineers didn't know what they know today, but building a road in the middle of a hillside is not a good idea. It's just not a good idea, but it's a little too late now because it's there, and we're just going to have to spend a lot of money to keep fixing it. This latest fix that cost $18 million, the life expectancy of the fix is about 30 years, 30 to maybe a little longer. But as one of the experts in our documentary says, what goes up must come down. And eventually that's what the earth is going to do. So that's
Yeah.
why the title is Living with Landslides, because it's not like it's going to go away.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, when they were developing Kentucky, which sits on the edge of the Appalachian Mountains. And I remember reading about how they would go into these hollers and blow up the hills to make the highways and the residential areas and developing all of our hills and things like that. Because I mean, I'm a little bit more sensitive to it. Like I was telling you about the flood in 2016 and having lived with what happened on West Park Drive and the flat backyard, and we have a wooded area behind us, and watching this hill on the side of us and how over time this water comes down, and watching the vegetation die off but we don't replace it and other stuff like that, and you see the land has shifted. And I think that not everyone understands how weather and land and development all plays a role in how we live today in this modern society. And I mean, and every once in a while a sinkhole happens up. I think we're lucky that we haven't had a sinkhole happen all that often in Cincinnati. But I assume that eventually, as things continue to occur, that may change.
We're much more prone to landslides than sinkholes. But Andria, you used to live on West Park Drive, which is one of the streets that we feature in the documentary, because there are 5 families there that had a landslide that devastated their homes, and they were at the bottom of the hill. So you don't always have to be at the top of the hill to experience a landslide. They're at the bottom, and they tried to get help from the city. The city didn't respond. Their insurance wouldn't cover it. They reached out to the Hillside Trust, and Eric Russo, who's the executive director, gave them, some advice and, some resources, directed them to people. But the estimates that they got to repair the hill, which would have been a big retaining wall, would have cost like more than $300,000. And those families did not have that money. So in the end, what they did is they went with a cheaper solution. And it's a guy with a construction company called Argo Construction, and he's a drainage expert. So he rerouted basically the water on that hill and put in all these big French drains with a collector, and then tied it into the catch basin in the street on West Park Drive. And he, did not guarantee it would work, but his solution cost about a fourth of the estimates that they got, and they went with it, and they shared the cost, and that solution has been there for about a year, and so far it's working well, and they're happy with it. So the documentary will show you how different families and neighbors have dealt with this. There are neighbors that you'll meet in the documentary who basically, they don't know what to do. The fix is going to cost more than their home is worth.
I mean, it's amazing to see what happened. I think also about Mount Adams and the many hillsides that they've had recently, and also on the west side of town, especially landslides. So I think your documentary is right on the money and well timed for to educate all of us.
A lot of people don't realize it, but every single neighborhood in Cincinnati is affected by landslides, every single one, because we all have hills and we all have this same geology, the weak shale that is underneath everything. And so even on flat land, like downtown, you wouldn't think like there's going to be landslides downtown. One of the things that we show you in the documentary is what happened in Friendship Park just earlier this year. Now, this is a landslide that didn't even make the news. Nobody knows about it really. And in fact, even if you're a downtown resident and you go to Friendship Park a lot, you probably didn't understand what was going on. For a while there, they just blocked off part of the park, but they didn't say why. And they were fixing a major landslide that cost $5 million. And that was Waterworks. So if you're a Waterworks customer, as we all are, you paid for that. So it really happens all the time and it's super expensive. So it's incumbent upon us to do everything we can to mitigate it, to help prevent it. And there are some things that we all could be doing to make the situation better. And we go into some of that, some of those tips too in the documentary.
Just out of curiosity, what for an average homeowner who might be surrounded with a hill or may live near something like that or live on a hill, what would you recommend that they do just to be preventive, so to speak?
Well, the number one tip is, and this is hopefully before you buy and before you build, you got to hire a geotechnical engineer to come and see if your home that you might want to buy is into bedrock. If it's into bedrock, you're going to be okay. But some of these structures are not. And if they're not, you could very well slide down the hill. So people who are building their homes on hills are, have to be especially aware of that. Now, if you're going to buy anywhere near a hill, like if you're at the bottom of the hill, I would definitely do a lot of research on the property and find out what has happened in the past, what's above you. And when it happens, the cost to repair it, I haven't heard anything less than $100,000 for a home,
Wow.
like a typical, like a small home. Like this one woman you'll meet in Mount Washington, they have a very modest home and her whole entire backyard has fallen away. So basically there's a huge drop off like right outside her back door. And the cost to repair it is $150,000 more than their home is worth. So what are you going to do? It's pretty scary.
Oh wow! And Mount Washington sits on a huge hill. I mean, just
Yeah.
driving up, just getting into Mount Washington alone is like a 45. What is it? A 45, maybe 50-degree angled hill up, sheer straight up, so to speak, just a little bit.
Yeah, well, these are any neighborhood that starts with Mount,
Yeah.
you can be sure it's got some hills, right? And another story we profile is in Mount Lookout, and this is a controversial development that has not been approved yet, but it's right off Delta Avenue, and it's actually in this beautiful green space, and it's on what is called a paper street. Now, paper streets are streets that were mapped long ago, like maybe 100 years ago, but they were never developed mostly because of the topography and issues. That's why they were never developed in the first place, but they still exist on maps. And that means you can still put a right of way in there. You can still put a street in there. So now that developers have basically developed everything that's easy, they're looking to these tougher areas like paper streets and hillsides to put in developments. And they're trying to squeeze 6 homes in this green space. And, it will present a lot of flooding problems and other issues, perhaps landslides if they do it. And this one is right still on the Planning Commission agenda. So it's very, topical. And the other one that we talk about, which hasn't happened yet, but looks like it's been approved, is in Ludlow, Kentucky. And this is a development that would add like 800 housing units. So homes, condos, apartments in the middle of the Ludlow hillside. And it will double the city's population. But if landslides start to happen when they begin this work, who's going to be responsible? And that's what the Ludlow City Council is being asked by residents. What are you going to do if this causes this damage? So another recommendation that the Hillside Trust has for cities, any city or small town, if you've got proposed hillside development, you should require the developer to post a performance bond. And that's not required now. So especially in smaller towns like Ludlow that have, don't have the hillside restrictions that a bigger city like city of Cincinnati does, thanks to the Hillside Trust. So it's really fascinating because it's happening all around us. And I hope everyone will watch on September 7th. It's a Wednesday night at 9 o'clock on Channel 9.
Well, thank you for coming on and telling us about that. I did not know about any of that. So it's like it's so fascinating. But Laura, I want to ask you if someone can't make the Wednesday night to see it, is there anywhere else they can watch the film?
Yeah. So if you can't see it Wednesday night, we are going to have some in-person screenings. We only have one set up so far. It's going to be on Wednesday, October 5th at the Redmore in Mount Lookout Square. That's going to be open to the public. And then I am willing to, have other community screenings. So if there's a civic group or somebody that wants to host it, they should contact me. And the best place to go for all this stuff is our website for the film. It's www.livingwithlandslides.com. And on Instagram, we're at Living with Landslides. And if you're a Facebook person, follow LQ Consulting. That's my company, my production company. And we've got all our information about everything there. And I believe also I should mention that if you can't see it, you can't set your DVR for September 7th, Channel 9 is going to have it streaming on their website for 1 week after it debuts. So you'd have 1 week to maybe catch it on Channel 9 and then maybe come to one of the in-person screenings, because after the screenings, we do Q&A with the audience, and hopefully experts who are in our film will be able to be there too. And we'll really be able to have some good conversations with the community about this issue.
Well, that's great. And everyone, that's it for today's show. And of course, we'll put all of that in the podcast description. I want to thank Andria for coming on and discussing all that good news. All that good chocolate news. Thank you so much, Andria.
You're welcome.
And I want to thank Laure for coming on and talking about this film. It's a very important discussion that needs to be had. So thank you, Laure.
Oh, thank you, John, for the opportunity.
And you can find out more information about today's topics and past podcast episodes at www.thecincinnatiherald.com, the Sesh newsletter, or on our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, folks, if you're looking for a free online webinar on home ownership, owning it, Cincinnati and Dayton 2022 will be taking place on Saturday, September 24th from noon to 1:30. The link for that event will be in the podcast description. And make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. Our podcast is on Apple, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, Amazon, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. In addition, the Cincinnati Herald is now looking for news distribution and delivery agents. Please contact our publisher, Walter White, at 513-680-7076 for more information. I'm John Alexander Reese.
I'm Andria Carter.
And have a good day.